All right. Well, I am thrilled to be welcoming Pierre, who is the founder of Philanthropit, to the channel. Pierre, welcome. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you. Likewise.
I'm really excited to dig into this, but first, as we typically do when I have guests on the channel, I would love to just pick a little bit into your background. So, talk to us about how you got into Bitcoin. What was your sort of genesis journey?
Oh my gosh. Well, my background is business, well over 20 years of business experience. I spent 13 years in US, over 10 years full-time in Asia, mostly in China. As some of you might know, in China, everything is blocked, so YouTube and all the news things. And so you're not very aware of what's happening outside of China. And I came back to Canada in 2016 and I opened an e-bike store. And so it was going to be a franchise of all sorts of electric mobility products. And I had this guy come in talking my ear off about this thing called Bitcoin, and he wouldn't leave my store. And I want to sell stuff, right? This is my store, so I'm trying to make money. And he just blah 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 Bitcoin this and Bitcoin that. And my wife looked at me and she's like, "What the heck is this guy talking about?" And so I was polite and I listened to him. And I went home and I Googled Bitcoin, and that's when I really fell down, went down the rabbit hole. And for various reasons, about 9 months later, I decided to close down the e-bike store, even though it was doing well. And I said, okay, well, what's next? And I fell so in love with Bitcoin and what it represented and the things that it could do, right? The power behind it, the possibilities. I took some of my money and I went to my parents' house. They have a big farmland in the province of Quebec because they're retired from the military, and they just bought a big farmland just to have peace and quiet. And I said, Dad, I'm going to build a Bitcoin mining center. And he looked at me, what the heck are you talking about? I don't care. Do what you want. And that's exactly what I did. So I bought a bunch of S9s from Bitmain, and I built a data center. And that was my real life experience into Bitcoin, not just reading about it, but actually doing something about it. And that was really empowering and eye opening.
No, that's fantastic. And interesting because I think we've all probably had that, that wild individual who's like, you got to look into this. And I think as early as that, a lot of people probably would have been like, okay, sure, and then not followed up on it. So props to you for being inquisitive enough to dive into it more. And yeah, I think like mining, there's very few activities to give as deep an appreciation for Bitcoin and how it works and what it means
Absolutely.
to have uncensorable, digital money. So that's all fine and good. And then fast forward a little bit, tell us a little bit about Philanthropit, both how you kind of came up with the idea, and then, there's a number of different pieces as part of this. So talk a little bit, maybe break the business down or break the concept down, and how do you see that sort of evolving over time?
It was a long journey because when all this was happening, when I started thinking about what I wanted to do about Bitcoin, I really was not happy with what was happening. The civil war essentially between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash and all those things happening in those times, and people fighting about block sizes and essentially people trying to take over Bitcoin, right? They tried to take over the brand and all those things. And I knew people in China on the manufacturing side because, of course, I lived there for more than 10 years. People associated with Bitmain, for example, and people are not aware of all the political stuff that was happening in the background. And I said, well, this is not right. And so I wanted to really help regular people get involved into mining and really participate in decentralization. So my initial project was completely different from what I'm doing now. And it was really, I wanted to do equity crowdfunding to launch a project in order to allow people to mine Bitcoin. So to be part owner of a Bitcoin mining operation.
Hmm.
So that's essentially what I wanted to do at first. And regulations were changing. Bitcoin mining, was growing rapidly. You got big players getting involved, and it just never made sense. It was never the right time. And at that time, ICO boom was happening, and people were stealing money from each other, right? From the regular people with, I'll be polite here and say BS projects. And honestly, that pissed me off. I said, well, how do you know what you're investing in? I'm all for decentralization and having regular people, invest in projects and be part of projects. I think that's important, but how do you protect them? And STOs at the time was nothing but talk, right? Like we think we're going to go towards STOs, but it wasn't really happening at the time. And honestly speaking, the rules and regulations were not in place to really allow it. And so at first I wanted to do that kind of project, and I never went forward because of that, because the regulations were just not in place. I got a job as a director of a nonprofit, offer education programs on entrepreneurship, financial literacy. I mentor quite a bit. I teach over 400 people plus per year about starting a business. During that time, I kept scratching my head, like, what do I do with this? How do I leverage Bitcoin to not only help people learn about it, leverage it, right? Have it on their cap table, or saving it, right? Stack some sats, as we say. And as I understood the nonprofit and the charitable world better, because of course I have to manage grants, I understood the inner workings and the friction and the issues that nonprofits and charities have. And I said, hey, we can really help educate them and build some tools around that to empower them so that they're less dependent on donations and less dependent on the government. And that's where Philanthropy was born.
Amazing. So talk us a little bit more about that. Why do you think that Bitcoin is a good fit and sort of aligned to nonprofits? And then maybe as part of that, break down the Philanthropy sort of platform and kind of what you offer those types of entities.
Charities have a lot of issues, right? So we're dependent on government. Those grants are typically 1 to 3 years, then they disappear, and the programs that those grants were supporting are dead, right? Donations is how we think typically that charities are working, but that's not true. It's mostly grants from the government, and donations on a year-to-year basis keep going down, right? And so it's more and more difficult now to receive donations as a charity. People are donating less. Larger entities like hospitals and like children's hospitals and things like that, especially in Canada, they get the bulk of the money. And so the smaller entities that they don't have the staff, they don't have the teams to go after charitable donations, they don't have the capacity to go and raise money.
Right.
And so the smaller, just like a small business doesn't have the capacity to raise capital easily, it's the same thing with a small nonprofit. And the vast majority of nonprofits and charities in Canada and the US are tiny, right? You're talking like less than 10 people, often much smaller than that.
Right.
And so if you look at the larger organizations, even the UN associated associations, they've been accepting Bitcoin donations since 2014, which sounds great. The issue is that they never really held on to it, right? They use BitPay and other entities like that to automatically convert it to dollars. So they never got the upside. They never got to really experience it. They never owned a Bitcoin wallet. They never did anything, right? So we need to educate them. We need to help them understand what this asset is. Finally, the laws have caught up with Bitcoin in a good way. I mean, we complain about government, at least I do, right? But finally, the laws are there so that entities, small businesses, nonprofits, charities can use Bitcoin, hold on to Bitcoin, receive Bitcoin donations. This is something that we can do, right? But we need to start with education. We cannot ask a board that manages a charity to use their hard-earned money to buy Bitcoin. It's just not viable, right? So we need to empower them to receive it either as a donation or earn it, which is what Philanthropy is going to be doing.
So break that apart, because you've got a couple different pieces, and I'll put a couple links in the description for folks to take a look at. But talk about what you've got planned as it relates to Philanthropy and charities in the near term, and then maybe what does that roadmap look like for what you think Philanthropy could look like, a year from now, for example.
So we're launching a community investment platform, and this platform will have two sides. The first side is equity crowdfunding, so fully legal and compliant, where the community will be able to invest in small businesses. And so we're leveraging securities laws, both in Canada and US, where small businesses will be able to raise money from the public. The other side of that, the same platform, we're going to be using rules that exist already, but nobody's really using them because it's too complex, where charitable organizations can raise money via community bonds. So this is a debt. It's not a donation. This is a loan repayable typically between 3 and 7 years that the charity or nonprofit can use for good, right? For the good of the community, whether they're rebuilding a church or they're building affordable housing or a women's shelter, for example. And so they have a specific goal in place and they're raising money for that, which shows it's fully transparent, right? So full transparency, you know where your money is going. and you get updated on what is the status of that investment. And so instead of just donating money to, let's say, the Red Cross, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong, but you can now spread your money. You could give money to the Red Cross or to whomever you want, but you can also lend money to a charity legally and compliantly, earn money on that over time, and then reinvest that money back into the community if that's what you want.
Very interesting. So you're providing the kind of you're pulling together these different pieces of both technology as well as, policy to provide this platform for charities to essentially have more ways that they can receive support from these different communities. And I imagine, per one of your points earlier in the conversation, the fact that you have this like very long tail of entities, some of whom don't have the resources to like even go and be proactive about some of this stuff. I imagine that sheer sort of like discoverability aspect is probably also useful for those charities, right? These are potentially entities that would otherwise not be even known that well, right? They have, maybe a place on the platform where people can see what they're doing, see the impact that they're having on local communities. And, that's a point that it seems like you're really emphasizing, which I love, which is like this local impact. And you see that mirrored in other initiatives. You've got like the beef initiative, here in the US, and some of the different folks involved in that, and really trying to build these almost circular economies with Bitcoin. It seems that in a similar fashion, you're trying to kind of bring the community and these nonprofits and charities together with the glue that is Bitcoin as well.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. Smaller charities don't even have access to grants. And so typically you have to have been in business for 2+ years. You need to have had grants in the past to qualify for new grants. Like there's so many roadblocks that makes it super hard for a small or new nonprofit to even try to get government support, for example. And so how do you start? How do you support yourself? A lot of investment platforms claim to have a lot of investors, but it's just a bunch of emails, right? It's people who register and they might check it once in a while, for example. In the US, you have a lot of equity crowdfunding platforms. In Canada, we really just have one we're talking about. And they claim to have 35K investors or so, but we all know it's BS, right? There's no reason to go back. There's no updates. If you look at your traditional equity crowdfunding platforms, a company will list themselves, they'll raise their money, and then they disappear, right? There's no more updates. They don't have a permanent place on that platform. And so we're going to make it super easy for people to understand, what am I investing in, right? And so that leads us to the next part of the ecosystem, which is really the marketplace that we're building. So this is philanthropit.shop, right? Which of course, Jolts is a big partner of ours, where by helping us build a community, you can earn up to 10% reward in Bitcoin, right? And so this is something that is voluntary. You don't have to participate. You can buy things without being a member, but you can choose to join our ecosystem as a member. And this money goes straight back to the community. This is not money we're putting in our pocket. This is how we're seeding a community investment fund. And this fund will be allowing us to either lend money to a charity or to invest into startups and small businesses that are listing themselves on our community investment platform. So this is how we're seeding that fund.
Very, very cool. And in that marketplace aspect, just in some of our offline conversations, it seems it's also the case that this could be potentially even a way for a charity to have a sort of storefront for, whether it's merchandise or maybe other things that they have to offer as goods and services to the community. I think that adds a lot of value as well. Is that correct? Is that part of the kind of vision for the marketplace piece?
Yeah, so it's a store of stores. So it's a fully managed solution, because again, the small businesses and nonprofits don't have the capacity. They don't have staff they can assign to building a store, managing a store.
Right.
And they don't have the expertise. So like, how do you manage SEO and all those things? They just don't know, right? They can barely build a basic website. And so this will give them a permanent place where they can offer programs, services, as well as products, either it's physical or virtual, through our platform. And we do all the work for them. Yeah, so they're going to earn up to 50% of the sale, as well as up to 10% in Bitcoin rewards for helping us basically just send them send us their traffic, right? Because they already have users, already have supporters, and so they can market that. Basically, they're just sharing their page within our platform with their existing users, and they can get up to 60% of the sale essentially.
A lot of folks listening to this or watching this may think of something like a geyser. I wonder if you can maybe compare and contrast, or to what degree is this similar to Geyser? Where does maybe Geyser excel and maybe Philanthropit excels in other ways? I'm just curious because that's probably something that folks watching and listening are familiar with.
Geyser is for people who know and understand Bitcoin, right? You need to have went down the rabbit hole. You need to understand what you're involved in. And so for those of us that are Bitcoiners, it makes perfect sense to be using something like Geyser. And in fact, Philanthropit will be having something on Geyser. So we're not competing. We're really just complementing what others are doing. It all comes back to education and having an easy way that's not too much in your face, right? To introduce Bitcoin to these people. They have governance, they have rules, they're afraid to make a mistake. There's so much fear. A nonprofit is not like a small business, right? They don't do what they want. They have so many rules and regulations, and they have a board of directors really holding them back. And so for them to even think about accepting Bitcoin, like it's a free donation, let's say,
Yeah.
They still have to convince the board to allow it. And this is a multi-month process. This is not something that's easy to do. And so by opening a store for them essentially on our on our platform, we're making it really easy for them to leverage their existing communities and be exposed to Bitcoin and Bitcoin rewards, right, and earning Bitcoin. We're not asking them to buy it, right? We're helping them earn it. And then we're going to be educating them on how to put that on their cap table and holding out to hold on for dear life is basically don't sell it for dollars, right? We all know dollars going to the toilet,
right.
And so you want to hold on to your Bitcoin for but that's going to take time. And so I absolutely love what Jolts is doing, and that's why I chased you guys to have this partnership, because I really love what you do. But even the Jolts offering, for example, is for bigger companies, established companies who understand what they're doing and they want to be involved. But the average small, tiny little business it's harder for them to do that, right? And so they need an easy way to be involved, exposed to Bitcoin, and earn a little bit of Bitcoin and play with the wallet for the first time. And then they can move on.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, it's clear that there's a lot that Philanthropit has that, just even putting Bitcoin to the side for a moment, a charity nonprofit is going to find highly valuable. So you sort of get them onto the platform, and then there's multiple ways that they can be exposed to this. And I think there is a real corollary. We think about with Jolts Rewards, like, how do we cross that chasm into kind of non-Bitcoin land? There are a number of kind of, other Bitcoin reward entities that I think fit that same profile of being very nested within the Bitcoin community. And there's nothing wrong with that. We love all those different entities. But when it comes to how do you get this out into the non-Bitcoin world, you have to go about it in a different with a different approach. And so, with Jolts, this kind of Bitcoin rewards as a service strategy that we're really trying to pioneer and build technology that lets Bitcoin rewards be brought to these other existing environments. It makes sense. And I think that analogy holds true for you guys. You're building a platform and ecosystem that is valuable for nonprofits and charities, but you're doing it in a way in which they're going to be eased into the sort of Bitcoin world, which I love. Just on the point of education briefly, because as a Bitcoin educator, it's something I'm deeply passionate about, and really from the very start of our conversations together was something that always struck me. You I think are an educator at heart as well. All the different kind of entrepreneurial education that you've done. What are just some of the ways that Philanthropit is thinking about that educational component for your audience?
So I've been doing Bitcoin education for years. And so I'm involved with a lot of youth groups, for example, Junior Achievements and others. And so I do Bitcoin education workshops probably every few months or so. And so that was a great learning experience, because you get to see where they're at, right? We take so many things for granted.
Yeah.
And I talk about Bitcoin and even the young people, they're like, well, what about this and what about that? And they're Bitcoin is a grandpa, it's a dinosaur, it's this and that. Like, no, we're building, like, we have Taro and we have all these other things coming up, and like, really, they don't see that Bitcoin is more than just the token, right? It's more than just the Bitcoin itself. Um, it's the tool. It's all the things we can do with it, right? It's like Lightning and all those amazing things that are we're going to get to leverage very, very shortly. So as part of your membership, as a member of Philanthropit, it comes with free education, and so both online and in person. We're currently converting a beautiful 23,000 square foot facility, which is a co-working and event space, and we're converting that into a Bitcoin hub.
Wow.
So it's going to be Bitcoin rented everywhere, in person meetups. So forget Eat Denver. We're going to be doing Bitcoin Ottawa, right?
Very cool. No, I love
And
that.
that's needed because there's so much misinformation and things that just people are just not aware of.
That. No, and there's different efforts out there, that have this kind of in-person touch, which I think is just so important, right? The difference between, hey, go watch one of my YouTube tutorials to let me actually sit down with you and talk you through it is night and day in terms of
Absolutely.
the stickiness that has in terms of knowledge. And so I love that you guys are doing this facility as well. That's going to really complement the educational component that goes along with Philanthropit. So a lot of stuff going on, but I see the vision, Pierre, and I think it's hugely important for that segment of the broader economy to be able to come in, be able to have access to these tools. Maybe in closing, talk a little bit about what are some of the steps that folks listening can take. You alluded to some of the rewards. I would like to note that you are a pioneer even for Jolts. We often think about Bitcoin rewards for making a purchase, right? That's a very common action you might earn a reward for. You guys are pioneering our technology for referrals. So you make a referral, you get some Bitcoin rewards. So maybe briefly talk a little bit about that. You don't have to go into all the gory details, but what can folks kind of go and do today that you might invite them to go check out?
Mm-hmm. So easy. Go to philanthropit.shop. We have retail memberships, we have corporate and nonprofit memberships. It's a straight up referral. You help us build our community, whether referring businesses or other people who believe in what we believe in. And you're going to get up to 10% in Bitcoin on every purchase that this person makes. So we're going to gamify that through Jolts. And so we're going to have free membership so you can earn your membership, because we don't want the membership fee to be a roadblock
Right.
to growing this community. That's not the purpose, right? And so we want to make it accessible to everyone. And so basically you can help us grow the community and earn money and get the word out. And we're purely Bitcoin, no BS. I'll leave it at that, but that's what we believe in. And so, of course, Philanthropit, Bitcoin. We are registered with the Canadian government as a money service business, as a dealer of virtual currencies. So we have a license, essentially the same thing as a crypto exchange. And so we can allow people to buy and sell digital assets. This is something we're looking into once we open retail locations, physical locations.
Yep.
That's not where we're starting, though. But we're already licensed for it if that's the way we go. We're the first investment company in Canada that's going to be leveraging QCAD. So that's Canadian dollar stablecoin. And so that's in partnership with Stablecore, which is a publicly traded company in Canada. So we have a lot of things in the works.
Nice.
This is going to be massive, and it's so exciting because we're going to get to help so many people.
Very, very cool. Well, Pierre, it has been an absolute pleasure. Folks, you know what to do. Go check out Philanthropit. I will leave all the links down below. We're pumped to be partnering with you guys from the rewards perspective. I think it's really cool that folks can kind of earn their way to that membership, as you said, get some awesome rewards for referring entities that are anyways going to find a ton of value in a platform like this, and really trying to bridge the gap between the Bitcoin world to the non-Bitcoin world, and get some of these organizations that are doing really, really important work in the community, but that, really don't have the resources, really don't have the tools, and certainly are not going to kind of naturally get to the the rabbit hole of Bitcoin, you're providing a path for that to happen. And we know what the implications could be, if these smaller organizations can be empowered by understanding Bitcoin, being able to hodl it, being able to kind of do all these things. So, but hopefully we can do this again soon, Pierre. It's been a pleasure, my friend, as always.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.